there seems to be an interesting tension between how you explain yourself as an old-fashioned Marxist versus how other people see your politics. How do you see that?
I will often get sort of associated with the dissident left or with contrarianism or with whatever. I just don't see that as being true. I am a Marxist and not a liberal or a progressive or a Democrat. I've never written anything that I didn't sincerely believe to be true. I never write anything simply for the purpose of contradicting what other people say. And everything that I've ever written politically is an expression of beliefs that I think stem quite comfortably from leftist first principles, in particular Marxist principles. The reason a lot of people would not categorize me on the left is because of my relationship to a particular expression of politics relating to race and gender and sexuality and disability, etc. But the OG critics of identity politics were all leftists, right? Like Eric Hobsbawm, Richard Rorty, or Todd Gitlin, Adolph Reed, et cetera, et cetera. I think it was Hobsbawm who said, like, if there is no identity, only identities, there is no left, right? Because the fundamental sort of both political need, but also moral imperative of left politics is precisely to transcend the boundaries of race, class, etc. The sort of weird place that we've gotten to in modern liberal politics, where the sort of way to address racism is by hyper fixating on race and by sort of emphasizing racial difference, I just think is a bizarre mistake that was made and that has been followed because of a weird kind of, path dependence and people's fear of breaking with the ordinary. For me, everything that I write is a fairly conventional and fairly orthodox expression of Marxist principles.
So let's delve into that a little more about, like, what does it mean to be a traditional Marxist? I mean, I think of that in terms of seeing history and culture and society primarily through the lens of class as the dominant operative principle. You referenced Eric Hobsbawm before. When you read his actual histories of the 19th century and all of it, it ends up just being very sober. I won't say conventional history, but it's definitely measured. Marxism has a ring to it culturally of you're going to be on the barricades of the Paris Commune and not in the delightful way of singing Les Miserables, as opposed to a framework of how we understand how history and society evolves.
I mean, no one could define what an actual purely orthodox Marxist is. And there are some ways in which I'm fairly unorthodox. I mean, probably the biggest one, though, is that like most people who identify with Marxism now, the notion of the inevitability of the dictatorship of the proletariat does not seem very confident to me right now. And certainly capitalism has demonstrated an ability to fold critiques into it and to prevent the kind of unrest that would make Marxism possible, Marxist revolution possible. Look, Marxism is a theory of history, first. It is an attempt to create a science of history that's no different from a science of biology or of physics. That sort of science of history then suggests an economic sort of reading, which was Marx's particular obsession. The analysis of capitalism and its internal contradictions and how it worked. Marx was fascinated by capitalism. He was one of capitalism's great poets. He saw it as an incredible machine for producing abundance, which I think people tend to leave out because they think of Marxism as being anti-capitalist. But Marxism is in fact post-capitalist, not anti-capitalist. Then both of those things, the sort of the history and the economics, then imply a political project. But the political project has always been the most contested and the least certain, in part because Marx and Engels deliberately underdrew what the political future would look like. I think it's important to say, I think a lot of people don't realize this. There is no expression within first order Marxism of what a Marxist society would really look like. We get to the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is this transitory period in which ordinary people become dictators. They become, in effect, people who run everything, but that gives way to a period in which that such organization is not necessary, and in that space, infinite freedom sort of flows. The closest that people have come to sort of a consensus Marxist future is something like semi-autonomous bands of people who have the right of exit, and which are sort of governed under the principle of from each according to his abilities, to each according to his need. But we don't really know what the Marxist future looks like, because Marx didn't tell us, and he said specifically, Well, I'm not smart enough to know that, right? I can't predict that for you. Marxist economics, the basic, the foundation is the notion that profit is derived from the work of labor, and that labor then must receive a dramatically smaller portion of that profit than they have actually created. Okay, so Marx is not the inventor of the labor theory of value. Adam Smith was a believer in the labor theory of value. He's seen as like the great free market capitalist guy. Labor theory of value just says that I have a factory, right? The factory itself costs X dollars. The raw materials cost Y dollars. And then the wages of the labor cost Z dollars. And we add those things up. And in order for profit to exist and for capitalism to function, we have to sell that for more than X plus Y plus Z dollars, right? Because if you don't, your company is losing money and it can't continue to function. Marx says, well, how does that work, right? Capitalism has to rely on some sort of principle of equivalent exchange. If I go to the marketplace and you're charging something for an apple that I see as completely inappropriate for the actual value of that apple, we'll never have a transaction. Of course, there's always wiggle, prices change, but fundamentally at every point of exchange, there has to be some sort of agreed upon idea. This thing is worth this amount of money, right? And if you don't ever get there, you walk and there's no transaction. If there's no transaction, there's no growth. There's no growth, there's no capitalism, right? So how can we have like a sort of equivalent X plus Y plus Z sort of equation in which we've tallied up every part of the cost of producing this good and then sell that good for more than it's worth? Where does that profit arise from? And the labor theory of value says it comes from the workers, and it must, right? That the other parts of the equation are inert and they can't possibly create anything. And so labor is the creator of value, of profit. And yet when we look at the capitalist system, it's not workers who capture the majority of the money, right? The people who capture the majority of the money is the ownership class, the rentiers, right? The bourgeoisie, who owns the factory and contributes only in that way, right? They capture a majority of the profit, while we know that profit was the sort of product of the labor class. And that is the root of capitalism's, both its sort of moral degradation, but also of its fundamental instability. And core to this is the understanding that if you want to be the good business owner, right, and give your workers appropriate wages, then that would be an amount equal to all of your profits, and you would therefore have no business, right? So in other words, it's not like the owners of the business can be appropriately redistributive because they're good people, right? It is a structural relation. The problem is that his position within the structure of capitalism is fundamentally exploitative. And in fact, the rate at which these businesses are capturing profit that they did not make, but that rather the worker class made, is called the rate of exploitation. This has some consequences. So one of the big things is that an MBA player who makes $20 million a year is a worker. He is not the bourgeoisie. He's the proletariat. A guy who earns a wage for Google, so let's say some project manager who's way up at the top of the totem pole and he makes $2.5 million a year. In every way, his life might appear to be totally different from somebody who works at McDonald's. But fundamentally, right, they are producing value that they do not capture, and so they are part of the working class. Working class in, sort of proletariat versus bourgeoisie has no relation to the size of the income that you're drawing. It's whether you are living off of rents, meaning are you drawing a percentage of a given transaction simply through the process of owning the sort of means of operation, or are you being paid a wage in exchange for your work, in which case you must necessarily be paid at a way that's insufficient, right? And so that's the moral sort of critique of capitalism, and that is sort of the structural critique of capitalism, that it does not distribute earnings in a way that is equitable to the amount of work or the control of the value that's going in.